Hello, my name's Anand. You're very welcome. I'm an emotional wellness coach and I help those with inner struggles so that they can move through that to uncover their inner richness. And in today's video, it's the second part of a 3-part video series on masks. What are they? Their benefits, their pitfalls. And if we want to reach to our original face, how we can move towards that, how we can uncover our original face. So if you haven't seen last week's video, there's a link to it above that you can watch it. It's probably better, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the order you watch them in, but it's beneficial. And in last week, I talked about the different types of masks that we wear, whether it's online, in person, the types of clothes, accessories, and so forth. Today, I'm going to explore why we use them, their benefits and their pitfalls, which I lightly touched on last week. So, looking at the benefits of masks, I think the first thing for me is that they are a form of protection in terms of they help to conceal things that we don't want others to see. And maybe it's really valuable for us to have that concealed for our protection, because if we're not in a space emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, that we can show our original face, and we don't own our original face, showing it out there may be too much, and we can't handle how we're received, because we are social creatures. We are about our community. So having that mask and having that persona can help us navigate the world of work, navigate social situations, family situations, or maybe just negotiating the things that we need to keep private to ourselves. It has its value. And then they help to kind of hide where we need to hide, you know. They also set a boundary. So masks set a boundary. They say you can get to know this part of me, but not this part of me. They can be fun. I mentioned that before. Masks can be playful. It's almost like as children when we're doing dress up, you know, and we pretend to be mummy or daddy, or we wear flamboyant clothes, or we wear adult clothes, or we get to play with it. And especially in our teenage years, it can be a great time to play with masks, because in teenage years, that's a really turbulent, emotional time of you don't know who you are. So you have to play around with different personas to get a sense of what fits for you. And it's whether you're sort of, I don't know, the nerd camp or the emo camp or the cool kids or the sporty kids or whatever it is that we all have. We're finding our tribe. And that's another value that masks can bring. So they have their place. The difficulty is when the masks get in the way. And when I was talking with different clients, and in particular, one thing I heard really struck home with me, really resonated. And they shared that they had a face for different people. And from that, they felt very disconnected towards both the people they met and themselves. And they had no idea who they were. And they felt very disconnected. And they felt very empty and very alone. No, not alone, actually. They felt very lonely. Aloneness is something different. They felt lonely. They didn't know who they were. And if that's what you're experiencing, that's when the mask then becomes a difficulty. And it creates this deep emptiness. And when you have this deep emptiness, you want to fill it. And that's why I work with inner work, because meaning inner struggles, the core thing can be this inner emptiness, and you use things to fill it. You might use work, so you become a workaholic, and that's one mask, your workaholic mask face. Or you use it with addiction, drink, drugs, gambling, online shopping, you know, the internet, social media. There's literally gaming. There's an addiction for everything. You know, I met somebody who was addicted to rock climbing and they nearly destroyed their body. Another person was addicted to weightlifting. They almost destroyed their body because they started taking steroids and different things. So you see, they're using these things to fill an emptiness. They're terrified of this hidden face that they've concealed from others and partially from themselves, or maybe fully from themselves. And so they act out of a space that they have to keep up this particular persona. And the persona becomes like a master and they are like a slave to it. And then there's this inner disconnect, which then becomes the behaviours, the unwanted behaviours. Because, yeah, sure, keep the mask on and carry on as normal. But if you want to work through that deep emptiness, that deep pain that you feel, that disconnect, where you feel no connection to yourself or others, then this is where the work I do can really help you. And I'm just going to use a story to illustrate how this need to keep a persona up. And her name is called Aloof. And Aloof is a beautiful woman who has this very hidden life that she's walked away from, and she's curated and cultivated a persona of enigma and grace and beauty, and people are like, oh, there's something about her, and she's very charming and very put together, and she attracts people around her, and she really influences, and it's like the world is at her feet, and she has, I don't know, a beautiful husband who's very wealthy, and she has a lifestyle that many people would love to have, and she wears beautiful clothes, and she moves through social spaces with ease, and everyone's like slightly in awe of her because she's aloof and she has that allure and that quality that we think we want. She represents something like that. But that's Aloof's outer face. When she's at home with no makeup, in her room, alone, on her own, with her inner demons inside of her, dancing around in her head. And maybe she takes a pill to keep herself calm, or maybe she takes a drink, or maybe she throws herself into another piece of work or whatever. Anything to avoid that inner pain. Because actually, deep down, her husband is with her not because he knows her or loves her, but because she is beautiful and she represents something. In actual fact, nobody knows her. And she is terrified if they see the real her, they won't want to know her. So she has to keep this aloof persona, this way of being with people. Charming, but not close. Courteous, but not too kind. Sort of slightly warm, but never letting anybody in. And we've often watched many movies about these characters, and they pay a very, very heavy price. And maybe for persona or for Aloof, she continues this life until she starts to get a bit older and her husband gets a little tired of her and he drops her and he finds somebody else and she's on the shelf and she's no longer valuable. Her beauty is gone. She's getting older, and even though she maybe gets plastic surgery and works out and keeps a certain size and all of that, the cracks begin. And then the inner cracks start to show. And she has no idea who she is. She's completely lost. And conversely, it can be for the man who is presenting this successful alpha male and look at me and I've got my thing together and I make stuff happen and there's no space for weakness. And yet this strong man goes around harming those around him. Because I can tell you, a very well put together man who knows himself doesn't need to make men or other men and other women smaller than him, or use them for his own ends, or to be destructive. He doesn't need to do that because he knows his own face. And we know many examples of those types of men who put on this persona, go out there and be the tough guy and they have no space for vulnerability. And that's a very lonely space. And the most interesting place that you'll see it is when people get drunk at a party. All the masks, they start to come off. And then the real faces try to come out and people try to get connection. Or maybe they try to get connection through sex. Or they try to get the connection through, social media platforms. It's a false type of connection. It gives an instant feel-good feeling, but it isn't actually good. And this is where masks can get in the way. This is where they take over. And even when I mentioned last week about the person who had this amazingly curated online presence, went for a job, met the person in real life, and there was too big of a disconnect. And so that person didn't hire them. So this is where the protection of a mask, or the need for a boundary, or the need to play with masks goes into something where you now become a slave to the mask. And one of my things that I really value is freedom. And if you value freedom, if you value connection, but your mask is getting in the way, and you don't feel free, and you don't feel connected, then the next video is going to be really of immense value to you. Because that's where we're going to talk about how you move from being a slave to your mask to working towards your original face. So until next week, have a lovely week. Bye-bye.